The twins cried as they tried to sell the puppy, their biggest dream. A millionaire touched by the scene approached, trying to understand the reason for that pain. The reason behind the sale was something so surprising that no one would believe it if he told them. When he decided to take action, no one expected what would happen next, an action that would change their lives forever. Get ready, because this story will touch your heart. Subscribe to the channel, like this video and comment on where you are watching from. The sunset was hiding behind the worn-out buildings of Villa Esperanza, while Ingrid Meyer clutched the only 2 tickets left in her wallet. The bus rocked over every bump, reminding her that even the ride home was difficult. Her curly hair, always well-groomed even in the worst moments, was tied up in a makeshift bun. The deep circles under her eyes betrayed the sleepless nights. "Next stop, Villa Esperanza," the driver announced indifferently. Ingrid took a deep breath. Each step toward her small home was like carrying the world on her shoulders. She knew what she would find when she arrived. Lara and Leona, her 10-year-old twins, waiting with anxious looks, asking with their eyes what they didn't dare to verbalize. Did Mommy get a job today? 3 months had passed since Ingrid had been thrown out of the Müller mansion in an elegant neighborhood. 3 months of humiliation that seemed like an eternity. The memory still burned like an open wound. "Are you taking things from our house, Ingrid?" Mrs. Müller's voice still echoed in her mind. "There's no point in denying it. Cameras don't lie." "What cameras, Mom? I would never do that. I've worked here for 5 years. There's a pearl necklace missing from my closet. And it happened to disappear after you cleaned up in there. I don't need any further explanation. Just pack your things and leave." No rights, no compensation, no letter of recommendation. Just the stigma of an unfair accusation, and doors slammed in her face when she tried to get another job as a maid. When she got off the bus, Ingrid adjusted her worn bag on her shoulder and walked through the narrow streets of the neighborhood. She greeted Donna Zora, who was selling tapioca on the corner, and waved to So Adam, who was fixing a bicycle on the sidewalk. The community was simple, but supportive. Even so, Ingrid avoided telling her full story. Pride was one of the few things she had left. The small 2-room house sat at the end of an alley. The walls were in desperate need of paint, and the front window had a cracked pane covered with a piece of cardboard, but it was the only home she could provide for her daughters. "Mommy's home," Leona, the more outgoing of the twins, announced, running to hug her. Lara, always more reserved, watched from the doorway with a shy smile. They were identical physically, the same almond-shaped brown eyes, the same light brown skin, the same curly hair that framed their heart-shaped faces, but their personalities were as different as night and day. "How was your day, my princesses?" asked Ingrid, kissing each one's forehead, trying to hide her tiredness. "The teacher sent her regards and asked if you had already obtained the missing materials," said Lara, always direct. Ingrid felt a lump in her throat. The list of school supplies was just another item on the long list of outstanding bills. "We'll get this sorted out soon," he said, forcing a smile. "And how is Timo?" An excited bark answered before the girls could even hear it. The medium-sized, floppy-eared, caramel-colored mutt came running, wagging its tail. It had been a gift from the neighbors for the girl's birthday months before. At the time, Ingrid was reluctant, yet another mouth to feed, but the animal brought so much joy to her daughters that she didn't have the heart to refuse. Inside the house, the situation was even more worrying than it seemed from the outside. The nearly empty refrigerator held only the remains of rice, beans, and half a cabbage. The kitchen cupboard displayed 2 cans of sardines and a half-empty package of pasta, the emergency reserve that Ingrid feared would run out very soon. "Come on, let's get dinner ready," he announced, trying to inject some cheer into his voice. As the girls helped set the table, Ingrid noticed something that her motherly heart could not ignore. Leona coughed a few times, a dry sound that seemed to come from deep in her chest. Lara discreetly placed her hand on her sister's forehead, an automatic gesture that indicated that the problem was not new. "Leona has a fever again, Mom," Lara informed her in a low voice, as if she wanted to protect her mother from yet another worry. "It's nothing," Leona protested, but the flush on her cheeks and the feverish glint in her eyes said otherwise. "After dinner I'll give you the medicine I have left," Ingrid said, trying not to show her desperation. It was the last pill of the generic antipyretic she had bought weeks before. During dinner, she tried to keep the conversation light, asking about school, telling funny stories from when the girls were little. It was an almost sacred ritual for Ingrid, protecting her daughters from the harshness of reality, at least for that shared moment. Later, after putting the girls to bed, Ingrid sat on the edge of the makeshift bed in the living room and allowed herself to cry silently. The electricity and water bills were overdue, the rent was due in a week, and now Leona was sick again, needing medicine she couldn't afford. He looked at his phone, which was almost dead. Yet another bill he wouldn't be able to pay. In the background, the photo of the 3 smiling women, in better times, seemed almost like a taunt from fate. His fingers quickly ran through the few options that remained. He couldn't ask his neighbors for more help, as he already owed them favors that he didn't know how to repay. The neighborhood social services had a waiting list that was months long. Selling his phone would mean cutting off his only means of contact for potential jobs. His eyes fell on Timo, who was curled up asleep on the worn rug. The dog, noticing his gaze, raised his head and wagged his tail, ever loyal, ever confident that everything would be okay. "Forgive me, my friend," Ingrid whispered, stroking the animal's soft fur. "But maybe it's the only way out." The decision broke her heart, but she had made it. Tomorrow she would take Timo to sell his goods at the street market in the city center. The money wouldn't be much, but maybe enough for Leona's medicine and some basic shopping to tide her over for a few more days, and enough days, she hoped, for her to finally get a new job. With this thought, Ingrid lay down next to her daughters on the narrow mattress, hugging them as if she could, with that gesture, protect them from everything that the unjust world had put in their path. Sleep was slow to come, visited by nightmares in which the girls were taken from her, accused again of things she had not committed. Outside, the night in Villa Esperanza continued its routine. Children ran through the alleys, ignoring the late hour. Loud music played in a nearby bar. Laughter and occasional arguments echoed through the thin walls. Life continued its relentless course, indifferent to the silent tears of a mother who, despite everything, refused to give up. For Ingrid Meyer could have lost almost everything, but she still kept, deep in her soul, that which no one could take. Away from her, the fierce determination of a woman who would fight until her last breath for her daughters. Fate, however, had a surprise in store for her that she could never have anticipated. And his name was Gabriel Fischer. Saturday morning dawned with a surprisingly blue sky over the capital, a contrast to the grey days that had predominated during the week. In his penthouse apartment, Gabriel Fischer watched the city awaken through the panoramic window of his office. At 38, he was the perfect example of what business magazines would call a success story. A middle-class son who had studied civil engineering on a full scholarship, Gabriel had built Fischer Construções from scratch, today one of the largest companies in the sector in the state. Obsessive dedication, strategic networking, and an incredible ability to anticipate trends in the real estate market had been his tools for success. "Mr. Fischer, coffee is served," Elena, the housekeeper, announced, interrupting his thoughts. "And don't forget the meeting with the investors at 10 o'clock. "Thank you, Elena," he replied, adjusting the luxury watch on his wrist. "You can leave the coffee right here." When the door closed, Gabriel sighed deeply. His schedule was perfectly organized on his computer screen. A meeting with investors in the morning, lunch with an important client, then a visit to the new development in the West Side. Everything was meticulously planned, as had been his life for the past 15 years. However, something was bothering him, a void that neither the luxury apartment, nor the imported car, nor the international trips could fill. Since the divorce, 3 years ago when Clara had left saying that he lived for the company, not for people, Gabriel had immersed himself even more in his work. Relationships came and went, always superficial, always predictable. After the meeting with investors, which went on longer than expected, Gabriel cancelled the business lunch. He needed some air. He left his car at the company and, on an unusual impulse, decided to walk through the city center. It was something he did occasionally when the feeling of isolation in his glass and concrete tower became suffocating. The city center was bustling with the typical Saturday bustle. Street vendors hawked their wares, families strolled, tourists photographed historic buildings. Gabriel walked around taking it all in, feeling both a part of the world and a stranger at the same time. It was then, as he was crossing the square, that he noticed a small crowd. He approached out of curiosity. In the middle of a circle of people, a woman and two identical girls, twins he realized, were offering a dog for sale, a medium-sized dog with caramel fur that seemed as lost as they were in that situation. "Is it purebred?" asked a lady, examining the animal as if it were merchandise. "No, ma'am," the woman replied, visibly uncomfortable, "but he is very docile and affectionate." "Breedless isn't worth much," the lady said, walking away disinterestedly. It was the girl's eyes that caught Gabriel's attention. It wasn't just sadness, it was a mixture of helplessness and resignation that shouldn't have been on such young faces. One of them tried to hide the trembling of her lower lip, while the other clutched her mother's hand tightly, as if she feared she too might be taken away. The woman, still young, perhaps in her early 30s, maintained a quiet dignity that contrasted with her simple worn clothes. Her tired eyes revealed sleepless nights, but there was a fierce determination in them. Gabriel recognized that look. It was the same one he had seen in the mirror during the years he had struggled to build his company. The difference was that she was fighting for something infinitely more valuable. Without thinking much, he approached the group. The dog immediately reacted to his presence, wagging its tail with disproportionate enthusiasm, as if it recognized him from some previous life. "How much does it cost?" he asked, addressing not the mother but the girls. One of them, the one who seemed the most fragile, looked up with a mixture of hope and fear. "Whatever you want to pay is fine," she replied in a low voice. The answer caught him off guard. Not even an attempt at negotiation, no suggested price. It was the raw language of desperation. "Why are they selling?" he asked, bending down to the girl's level. The other twin, who had remained silent until then, replied almost in a whisper, "It's so my mother doesn't get sick." The sentence, of disconcerting sincerity, hit Gabriel like a punch. He looked at his mother, who looked away, torn between pride and need. "Where's your mother?" he asked, even though she was clearly there. But something compelled him to establish a dialogue, to better understand that situation that seemed so distant from his everyday reality. "I'm here," the woman replied, stepping forward. "I'm Ingrid Meyer. These are my daughters, Lara and Leona." There was a defensive tone in her voice, understandable when faced with the approach of a well-dressed stranger. Gabriel noticed that she instinctively placed herself slightly in front of the girls, in a protective gesture. "Gabriel Fisher," he introduced himself, extending his hand. She hesitated for a moment before taking it. "I don't mean to be nosy, but do you really need to sell the dog?" Ingrid's eyes hardened. "We're not asking for charity, sir. We're selling our dog because we need the money." The dignity in that response impressed him. Before he could elaborate, the girl who seemed the most fragile, Leona, he deduced, was struck by a coughing fit. A dry, persistent cough that made her mother momentarily forget the conversation to support her. "Are you okay, my love?" Ingrid asked, distressed, placing her hand on her daughter's forehead. "You're burning up with fever again." The other twin, Lara, quickly took a bottle of water out of the small backpack she was carrying. "Here, Leona. Drink slowly." The "again" did not go unnoticed by Gabriel. In an impulse that not even he fully understood, he took his wallet out of his pocket and took out a few $100 bills. "Please take this for the dog," he said, handing the money to Ingrid. "But leave him with you. He seems important to the girls." Ingrid looked at the money with a mixture of relief and distrust. It was much more than she had expected to get from selling Timo, but accepting it caused her a moral discomfort that she could not explain. "Why would I do that?" he asked without reaching out to take the money. "Because I can help, and because—" Gabriel hesitated, searching for words. "Because we all need help at some point." A tense silence settled between them, broken only by the noises of the surrounding. Square and Leona's still labored breathing after her coughing fit. "Mommy, please," Lara whispered, looking anxiously at her sister. "Leona needs her medicine." That silent plea was what finally convinced Ingrid. With a quick movement, she took the money and put it in her worn purse. "Thank you," she said dryly, still suspicious of his intentions. "Come on, girls." Gabriel watched as they gathered their few things preparing to leave. The dog, Timo, looked at him with what seemed like canine gratitude, wagging his tail frantically. Something inside him stirred. An uneasiness at the idea of simply letting them go, knowing that the money would only be a temporary solution. Before he could fully rationalize, he heard himself ask, "What's the matter? Do you live far from here?" Ingrid stopped, her shoulders visibly tensing. "Why do you want to know?" "I could take you to a pharmacy to buy medicine for your daughter," he offered, aware that he sounded intrusive but unable to simply turn away. "It's not necessary," Ingrid replied. "We can manage." But Leona coughed again, a sound that seemed to tear her small chest, and Ingrid closed her eyes for a moment, as if fighting an internal battle. "Actually," he said finally, "the nearest drugstore with affordable prices is a few blocks away. If you could come with us there." That was how Gabriel found himself walking through the streets of the city centre alongside Ingrid and her daughters, with Timo following happily, as if this strange alliance were the most natural thing in the world. Conversation was minimal, limited to directions and practical observations. Ingrid kept a calculated distance, answering only what was necessary, while the girls watched curiously the man who had saved their dog. At the pharmacy, while Ingrid was talking to the pharmacist about Leona's medication, Lara discreetly tugged on Gabriel's jacket sleeve. "You're rich, aren't you?" he asked with the disconcerting frankness of children. Gabriel smiled uncomfortably. "I have a comfortable life." "My mother worked for rich people before," Lara continued, "but they were mean to her. They accused her of taking a necklace, but she would never do that." Before Gabriel could respond, Ingrid returned with a small packet of medicine. "Lara, don't bother Mr. Fisher," she scolded gently. "She's not bothering us," Gabriel assured. Then on impulse, "Where do you live? I can call a taxi to take you." Ingrid hesitated again, but Leona's evident fatigue spoke louder than her pride. "Hope Village. It's a bit far from here." That was how, after Gabriel insisted on paying for a taxi, he found himself following the vehicle in his own luxury car, driven by a curiosity and concern that he could not rationally explain. Something about that family had touched him in a way that nothing had in recent years. As he drove through the streets that gradually became narrower and more dilapidated as they moved away from the center, Gabriel wondered what he was getting himself into. But the image of Leona's feverish eyes and Ingrid's quiet dignity remained vivid in his mind. That Saturday, which had begun like so many others in his organized and predictable life, had taken an unexpected turn. And for the first time in a long time, Gabriel Fisher felt something other than the existential boredom that had become his constant companion. He didn't know it yet, but he was about to experience a reality that would forever change his perspective on what really mattered in life. The taxi parked at the entrance to the narrow alley that led to Ingrid's house. That final stretch would have to be covered on foot, as not even the most experienced drivers ventured into the narrow streets of Villa Esperança. Ingrid got out with the girls and Timo, still uncomfortable with the presence of Gabriel, who had parked his imported car a few meters behind. "You don't have to walk us home," she said, adjusting the strap of her bag on her shoulder as Leona leaned lightly on her. "You've already done more than enough." Gabriel looked around, observing the surroundings. Children ran barefoot through the dirt streets. Some houses had exposed bricks without plaster, makeshift shacks mixed with small masonry buildings. A completely different scene from the luxury condominiums and mirrored buildings he was used to. "I wanted to make sure you arrived safely," he insisted, "if you don't mind." Ingrid hesitated. The man, with his expensive suit and fancy watch, looked as out of place as a penguin in the desert. But there was something in his eyes, an almost naive sincerity, as if he really cared, with no ulterior motives, or maybe it was just fatigue clouding his judgment. "As you wish," he replied, dryly, "but it is a simple path." As they entered the alley, the curious eyes of the locals followed the strange visitor. A lady who was hanging clothes on the line stopped to watch. Children stopped their games. A group of teenagers murmured something as Gabriel passed by. "Does everyone know everyone here?" he asked, trying to break the awkward silence. "It's a small community," Ingrid replied. "News travels fast." "Timo is the most popular dog on the street," Lara added, holding tightly to the makeshift collar. "Everyone likes him." "I imagine so," Gabriel smiled, noticing how the animal seemed to know every corner, greeting other dogs along the way with friendly barks. After a few minutes of walking through increasingly narrow streets, they came to a small corner house whose modest facade had seen better days. The faded blue paint was peeling in several places, and the metal gate showed obvious signs of rust. "This is it," Ingrid announced, stopping in front of the entrance. "Thank you for the help." The word seemed difficult to get out, as if admitting that she needed assistance was painful for her. Gabriel noticed her discomfort and nodded respectfully. "Nothing to thank you for," he replied. "I hope Leona gets better soon." The girl, who had been silent until then, looked at him with eyes bright with fever. "Thank you for not taking Timo," she said weakly. Something about the simplicity of that thank you touched Gabriel deeply. He bent down until he was level with the girls. "Timo seems like a very special dog. He is very lucky to have you as family." Leona smiled for the first time, and Lara, always more reserved, also relaxed her defensive posture slightly. "Well," Ingrid said, opening the rusty gate, "we'd better go inside so Leona can take her medicine." She clearly expected that to mark the end of the encounter, but Lara surprisingly intervened. "Don't you want to see our house?" he invited, to his mother's obvious shock. "Lara," Ingrid scolded, but the girl continued. "Timo will want to show where he sleeps." Gabriel, sensing Ingrid's conflict, shook his head. "Perhaps another time. I think your sister needs to rest right now." The relief on Ingrid's face was palpable, but Gabriel also noticed a hint of surprise, as if she expected him to insist on coming in, taking advantage of the situation. "Here's my card," he said, pulling a business card from his inside jacket pocket. If you need anything, you can call me. I have contacts at some clinics and hospitals who might be able to help if Leona needs better care." Ingrid took the card hesitantly, examining the Fisher Construction logo printed in gold relief. "Buildings?" he asked, arching an eyebrow. "Yes, I am a civil engineer. My company builds residential and commercial buildings." "I see," she replied, tucking the card into her purse with a gesture that clearly indicated she had no intention of using it. "Thank you again." The tone of finality was unmistakable. Gabriel nodded, understanding the message. "It was nice meeting you both," he said, smiling at the girls. "Take good care of your sister, Lara, and you, Leona, take your medicine properly." "Oh." He walked away. He heard the front door close behind him. He walked slowly back to the main street, taking in the details of that world so far from his own. The communal sinks where some women washed clothes, the makeshift clotheslines between windows, the smell of home-cooked food mixed with the sounds of televisions turned up loud. Already in the car, before starting the engine, Gabriel looked at his watch. He had missed the meeting at the construction site and several other appointments. Strangely, he didn't care. For the first time in years, something had shaken up his predictable routine, and the feeling was disturbingly refreshing. Meanwhile, inside the small house, Ingrid administered the medicine to Leona, who had already laid down in the bed they shared. The fever persisted, but the cough seemed less intense. "Who was that man, Mom?" Lara asked, sitting on the edge of the bed, petting Timo, who had settled at Leona's feet. "Why did he help us?" Ingrid sighed, putting the remaining medicines in a small box on the refrigerator. "Some people like to do charity," she replied, trying to sound neutral but not quite able to hide her bitter tone. "He seemed nice," Lara insisted, Not like those other ones, the Müllers. Hearing that name, Ingrid felt her stomach turn. The humiliation of the unfair accusation still burned like fire. Not all rich people are like the Müllers, she conceded, trying to be fair despite her suspicion. But it's best not to get our hopes up about this Mr. Fisher. He did a good deed today, and we should be grateful for that. But tomorrow he'll go back to his world and we'll continue in ours. He said we could call if we needed to, Lara recalled. And we won't have to, Ingrid said more firmly than she felt. We'll manage like we always have. I'll find a job soon. As the girls fell asleep, Ingrid went to the small kitchen sink, where she washed her face with cold water. Her reflection in the small, cracked mirror showed a drawn but determined face. The money she had received from Gabriel would be enough to buy food for a few weeks and pay the back rent. A temporary blessing, but not the solution to her problems. Gabriel's business card felt like it was burning in her purse. Part of her wanted to tear it up, her wounded pride rejecting any kind of dependency. Another part, a mother, desperate to protect her daughters, knew she couldn't afford to refuse help no matter the source. The next morning, Leona's condition had improved considerably. Her fever had gone down, and she had more energy. Ingrid prepared a simple breakfast, but it was more filling than usual thanks to the unexpected money. "Mum, can I go to school tomorrow?" Leona asked, nibbling on a piece of bread. "If you keep getting better, yes," Ingrid replied, relieved to see the color returning to her daughter's face. "I think it was Timo who brought us luck," Lara said, feeding the dog a small piece of bread. "He knew that man would help us." Ingrid didn't answer, concentrating on tidying the kitchen. She didn't want to give her daughters the idea that they depended on the charity of others, but deep down, she knew that Lara was right. Gabriel Fisher's appearance had been an almost miraculous coincidence. 2 days later, when the girls had returned to school, the doorbell rang. Something unusual, as neighbors usually just knocked on the door or called out by name. When she opened it, Ingrid found a delivery man with a box in his hands. "Ms. Ingrid Meyer?" he asked, consulting a clipboard. "Yes," she replied, confused. "Delivery to you, ma'am. Could you sign here, please?" Puzzled, Ingrid signed the receipt and received the box, which was surprisingly light. There was no sender's name, just her name and address printed on a piece of paper. Inside, she found several medications, not just the fever-reducing medication she had bought for Leona, but vitamins, antibiotics, and other basic medicines. Alongside, a simple note, "For the emergency kit, GF." Ingrid sat trying to process what this meant. How had he found out her full address? Why did he keep helping her? What did he want in return? Years of working in family homes had taught Ingrid to be wary of unexplained favors. The world was not a place where rich people simply helped poor people without expecting anything in return. There was always a price, even if it wasn't immediately exacted. Yet another part of her, perhaps the part that still believed in selfless kindness, wanted to believe that Gabriel Fisher was just what he seemed, a privileged man who, for some reason, had decided to reach out to a family in need. That night, after the girls had fallen asleep, Ingrid took the business card out of her purse and stared at it for a long time. Her charged cell phone, thanks to yet another bill paid with the money she had received, seemed to beckon her to make the call. "No," she muttered to herself, putting the card away again. "We don't need charity." But fate had other plans. The next morning, while looking for work at a small neighborhood store, Ingrid overheard a conversation between two men discussing a large construction project. "Fisher Construções is hiring people for the new project in the East Zone," said one of them. "They pay well and hire even those who have no experience." The name made Ingrid stop in her tracks. Was it a coincidence or an opportunity that the universe was putting in her path? That night, after much deliberation, she finally picked up the phone. With trembling fingers, she dialed the number on the business card. After 3 rings, the now familiar voice answered, "Gabriel Fisher." "Mr. Fisher," she said, taking a deep breath to control her nervousness. "It's Ingrid Meyer, the dog lady." There was a brief silence on the other end, followed by a response that seemed to contain a smile. "Ingrid, I was waiting for your call." "Wait for my call?" Ingrid asked, her suspicion returning immediately. "What does that mean?" Up on the penthouse floor, Gabriel smiled, realizing how his choice of words had come across. "Sorry, I didn't mean to sound presumptuous. I was hoping you'd get in touch." He could feel the hesitation on the other end of the silence thick with apprehension. "I got the medicine," Ingrid finally said. "Thank you, but it wasn't necessary." "How is Leona? Is the fever gone?" The genuine question, the fact that he remembered her daughter's name, softened Ingrid's defensive posture slightly. "Yes, she's better. She went back to school yesterday." "I'm glad to hear that," Gabriel replied sincerely. After a brief pause, he added, "Is there anything I can help you with? Anything at all?" Ingrid's pride almost made her hang up the phone at that moment. But the image of the piled-up bills and the nearly empty pantry kept her on the line. "I heard your company is hiring for a project on the east side," she said, the words coming out with difficulty. "Yes, we are," Gabriel confirmed, surprised by the mention. "The Horizonte project, a residential condominium with integrated commercial areas." "I'm looking for a job," Ingrid continued, her voice firm despite her discomfort. "I have experience as an administrative assistant, a receptionist and, well, housework, but I can learn any job." "Come to the office tomorrow," Gabriel interrupted, sensing her determination. "We can talk about the possibilities." After agreeing on a time and practical details, the call ended, leaving both of them with thoughts swirling in their minds. Ingrid put her phone away, still unsure if she had made the right decision. Asking for help, especially from a stranger, went against everything her hard life had taught her. But Gabriel's last words on the phone had sounded different. "This isn't charity, Ingrid, it's a job opportunity. You have the qualifications and we have openings." The next morning, after dropping the girls off at school, both excited about the prospect of their mother getting a job, Ingrid took 2 buses to get to the Fisher construction building in the city's financial heart. The contrast with her reality could not have been greater. Men and women in formal attire hurried by, carrying briefcases and tablets, while she felt out of place in her best outfit, a pair of jeans without rips and a simple white blouse, the only closed-toe shoes she had carefully cleaned for the occasion. The building's receptionist looked her up and down, but Ingrid stood tall, refusing to be intimidated. "I have a meeting with Mr. Fisher," he announced with a confidence he didn't feel. Ingrid Meyer. To her surprise, her name was on the visitors list. With a temporary badge, she was led to the panoramic elevator that rose silently to the 20th floor. The doors opened directly into a spacious office where glass and steel predominated. A young secretary greeted her with a professional smile. "Ms. Meyer, Mr. Fisher asked me to accompany you to the conference room. He's finishing up a call and will join you in a few minutes. May I offer you a coffee?" "No, thank you," Ingrid replied, following the woman down a hallway decorated with architectural models and photographs of imposing developments. The conference room was smaller than she had imagined, with an oval table that could seat about 8 people. One wall was entirely made of glass, offering a panoramic view of the city. Ingrid approached slowly, watching the capital stretch out to the horizon, the towering skyscrapers, the parks like small patches of green, and, in the distance, the palm suburbs that spread out indefinitely. Somewhere in that sea of buildings was Villa Esperanza, his little corner of the world, as far from this reality as the stars are from Earth. "Impressive, isn't it?" Gabriel's voice startled her. He had entered silently and now approached, dressed in an impeccable dark suit, but with a less formal expression than expected. "It's a unique view," Ingrid agreed, stepping back slightly from the window. "Thank you for having me." "Please. Have a seat," Gabriel invited, indicating one of the chairs. "Before we start talking about work, can I ask you a personal question?" Ingrid tensed but nodded cautiously. "What exactly happened at your last job? Your daughter mentioned something about a false accusation." The question hit her like a bucket of cold water. Instinctively, her posture stiffened. "Why does that matter for a current vacancy?" he asked defensively. Because I want to understand who I'm hiring, Gabriel replied frankly, and because I have a feeling this story has had a profound effect on your life. Ingrid hesitated. Talking about that episode still hurt, but perhaps it was necessary if she wanted to start over. I worked for 5 years in the Müller family's house, a wealthy family in the south side of town. He began, the words coming out with difficulty. I took care of the house, the children, I cooked, I did everything. One morning, Mrs. Müller accused me of stealing a pearl necklace. She said the security cameras had caught me, but she never showed me any proof. She stopped, taking a deep breath to contain her emotion. I was fired on the spot with no rights, no references. I tried to explain. I begged to see the images, but she refused. She said that if I insisted, she would call the police. And you didn't take legal action? Gabriel asked, frowning. Ingrid let out a bitter laugh. With what money? With what lawyer? And whose word would be worth more? That of a maid from the outskirts or that of a respected socialite? The silence that followed was heavy. Gabriel seemed to process the story, his eyes fixed on some distant point. I know Hannah Müller, he finally said, to Ingrid's utter surprise. Our social circles occasionally intersect. Ingrid felt her blood run cold. So that was it. Ike knew the Müllers, probably believed them. This whole farce of an interview was nothing more than morbid curiosity about the thief. I see, she said, standing abruptly. I don't think there's anything further to discuss. Thank you for your time. Wait, Gabriel said, not raising his voice. Please let me finish. Hannah Müller has a reputation for being difficult. I've heard stories about how she treats her employees, and more importantly, I know she's made similar accusations before. Ingrid stopped, still standing, processing the information. Like this? 2 years ago, she accused a gardener of stealing expensive tools. The man was fired, but the tools later turned up in the shed. She never apologized or reinstated him. The revelation hit Ingrid like a bolt of lightning. So it hadn't been the first time. Maybe the necklace wasn't really missing at all. Why are you telling me this? He asked, his voice shaking. Because I believe in you, Gabriel replied simply, and because I want to offer you a real job, not one based on pity or charity. He pushed a folder that was on the table towards her. We have an opening in the administrative department. Nothing glamorous, organizing documents, answering phones, general support to the department. The salary is decent with full benefits, including health insurance for you and your daughters. Ingrid opened the folder with trembling hands. The contract seemed legitimate, the terms better than she could have expected. Why are you doing this? He asked, the suspicion still present but beginning to give way to a timid hope. Gabriel hesitated as if he were searching for the answer himself. Honestly? I can't fully explain it. Maybe it's because meeting you and your daughters made me realize how empty my life, despite being materially comfortable, has been. Or maybe it's because at some point in our lives, we all need someone who simply believes in us. Those words, spoken with disarming sincerity, finally broke through the barrier of distrust Ingrid had erected. For a fleeting moment, her eyes filled with tears that she quickly held back. If working for me isn't comfortable, for you, Gabriel continued, I can make a recommendation to other companies. I have contacts and— No, Ingrid interrupted, surprising herself. I will accept the position. If you really believe I can do it well. Gabriel smiled, extending his hand for a formal shake that sealed much more than an employment contract. It was the beginning of a journey neither of them could have foreseen. That afternoon, when she picked up the girls from school, Ingrid carried more than just the folder with the signed contract. She carried with her something she had lost months ago, hope. I got a job, he announced to his daughters, who celebrated with jumps and tight hugs. Where, Mum? Doing what? Asked Lara, always the most curious. At Mr. Fisher's company. I'll be working in the office, organizing documents and answering phones. I knew he was cool, Leona exclaimed, her eyes shining. Timo was right. Ingrid smiled, allowing herself for the first time in a long time to believe that maybe, just maybe, the universe had finally decided to smile on her. What she didn't know was that while she was returning home with her daughters, Gabriel Fersha made a call that would further change the course of their lives. "Hannah, it's Gabriel. We need to talk about a former employee of yours, Ingrid Meyer." On the other end of the line, Hannah Müller's voice became visibly tense. "What's wrong with her? Why are you asking about that woman?" "Because I believe you have made a grave mistake," Gabriel replied, his voice calm but firm. "And it is time to correct it." The silence that followed was brief but loaded with implications. "I don't know what you're talking about," Hannah replied, her voice now defensive. "That woman stole from me." "Are you sure about this, Hannah?" "Absolutely sure. Because I have lawyers who are very interested in concrete evidence for such serious charges." Another silence, longer this time. "What do you want, Gabriel?" "The truth, and depending on it, perhaps a formal retraction. An entire family's life has been destroyed because of this accusation." "And since when do you care about maids?" Hannah asked disdainfully. The question struck Gabriel unexpectedly. Since when? Really? What had changed him in the last few days? "Since I realized that some people, even having much less, are infinitely more worthy than others who have everything," he replied, ending the call. Sitting in his office with the city at his feet, Gabriel Fisher knew he had crossed a line. His life as a passive observer, protected by money and status, was ending, and surprisingly, he didn't miss it. In the Miller's apartment, Hannah stared at the disconnected telephone, a look of panic growing on her aristocratic face. Slowly, she walked to the closet, removed a false panel on the back wall, and gazed at the small safe hidden there. With trembling fingers, she punched in the combination. Inside, among various jewels, was a blue velvet box. She opened it, revealing the pearl necklace that had disappeared months before, the one for which she had destroyed an innocent woman's reputation. "Richard," he called urgently, "I need to speak to our lawyer immediately." Ingrid's first few weeks at Fisher Constructions were a whirlwind of new experiences. The corporate environment, so different from the family homes where she had worked, required constant adaptation. Strict schedules, formal protocols, technical jargon, everything was a different universe for someone who was used to cleaning, cooking, and taking care of children. However, to the surprise of many, including herself, Ingrid demonstrated a remarkable capacity for learning. Her meticulous organization, ability to multitask, and attention to detail, qualities honed over years of domestic work, proved extremely valuable in the corporate environment. "You organized the entire file of pending projects in just 2 days?" asked Marcia, the administrative department supervisor, examining the impeccably labeled folders. "I thought it would take at least a week." Ingrid smiled discreetly. "I like to keep everything in order. It makes everyone's job easier." What she didn't mention was that she had stayed 2 hours overtime to complete the task, not out of obligation, but out of a genuine desire to prove her worth. As the days went by, her presence in the office became more and more natural. Colleagues who had initially looked at her with curiosity, everyone knew she was a personal recommendation from the company owner, gradually came to respect her for her competence and discretion. Gabriel maintained an appropriate professional distance. Their encounters were limited to brief greetings in the hallways or departmental meetings where he rarely addressed her directly. In a way, Ingrid appreciated this approach. It allowed her to earn her place on her own merits, without the constant shadow of favoritism. At home, the transformation was even more evident. With a steady salary and benefits, Ingrid was able to transfer the girls to a better school, closer to home. The pantry, once chronically empty, was now stocked. Bills were paid on time. Small luxuries became possible: an ice cream on Sunday, new books for the twins, a real collar for Timo. "Mom, can we paint our room?" Leona asked one Friday night as they ate dinner. "What color would you like?" Ingrid replied, realizing with a pang of excitement that this was the first time in years she could answer like this without having to explain why there was no money for paint. "Light blue," Leona exclaimed. "Rosa," Lara disagreed instantly. The little argument that followed, so normal, so ordinary, filled Ingrid's heart with profound joy. Her daughters were finally getting a chance to worry about childish things, not bills or medicine. A month into her job, a surprising phone call changed the course of events again. Ingrid was organizing documents when her extension rang. Administrative Department, Ingrid speaking. Ingrid, it's Gabriel. Could you come to my office, please? There's something important we need to discuss. His serious tone immediately worried her. Had she made some serious mistake without realizing it? Was she about to lose the job that had transformed her life? Entering the spacious presidential office, Ingrid was surprised to find not only Gabriel, but also a middle-aged man in an impeccable suit sitting in one of the armchairs. Ingrid, this is Dr. Raphael Morgan, our firm's lawyer, Gabriel introduced, indicating a chair for her to sit down. Nice to meet you, Mrs. Meyer, the lawyer said with a polite smile. I have been following your case with interest. My case? She asked, confused and increasingly apprehensive. Gabriel and Raphael exchanged glances, as if deciding who would break the news. It was Gabriel who finally spoke. I contacted Hannah Müller about the accusation she made against you. Ingrid felt as if the ground had disappeared beneath her feet. The mention of that name still had the power to completely destabilize her. You what? He whispered, his face draining of color. Why would you do that without consulting me? It was necessary, Gabriel replied firmly, and the result was revealing. Dr. Raphael opened a folder and pushed a document toward Ingrid. This is a formal statement signed by Mrs. Müller admitting that the accusation against you was unfounded. The necklace she claimed was stolen was found in her own home. Ingrid stared at the paper, the words blurring before her teary eyes. It was too surreal to take in at once. That's not all, the lawyer continued. There is also an offer of financial compensation for the moral and material damages caused. It would be an out-of-court settlement to avoid public exposure of the case, something that would be extremely embarrassing for the Müller family. Compensation? Ingrid repeated, still dazed. 200,000, Dr. Raphael specified. A sum that we consider fair, considering the months of unemployment, the damage to his professional reputation, and the emotional suffering caused. The silence that followed was thick with conflicting emotions. Ingrid glanced between the document, Gabriel and the lawyer, as if searching for some sign that this was an elaborate joke in poor taste. Why would she do this now, he asked finally. Why would she? Admit it, after all this time. Gabriel hesitated before answering. Let's say that Mrs. Müller understood that the consequences of maintaining the lie would be more damaging than admitting the truth. There was something in his tone, a certainty, a subtle hardness, that made Ingrid realize that their conversation had not been merely persuasive. Had it been a veiled threat, an ultimatum? She couldn't imagine Gabriel acting like that, but the determination in his eyes suggested that there was much more to the story than he was letting on. What if I don't want the money? He asked, surprising them both. What if I want to take this further, Sue? That would be your right, the lawyer replied. We could prepare you for a longer and possibly more grueling process, but with the potential for greater compensation. However, think of the girls, though, Gabriel added softly. That amount would provide for their future, a quality education, perhaps even a home of their own. And you could do it without the emotional toll of reliving this experience in court for years. The words hit Ingrid hard. This wasn't just about her and her personal vindication. It was about Lara and Leona, about giving them a security that went beyond what her current salary could provide. I need time to think, he said finally. Of course, Gabriel agreed. Take all the time you need. And know that no matter what you decide, your job here is guaranteed. It's not conditional on anything. That night, after putting the girls to bed, Ingrid sat on the small porch of the house, watching the city lights in the distance. Timo lay down beside her, as if sensing her inner turmoil. 200,000, an amount he had never imagined he had, enough to radically change their lives. But there was something more than money. Hannah Müller's admission, even if forced by circumstances, meant the restoration of her dignity, the confirmation that she had been right all along. That was worth more than any monetary value. The cell phone vibrated in his pocket, a message from Gabriel. I hope I'm not being intrusive. I just wanted to say that whatever you decide, I'm here to support you. And if I may say something personal, You deserve every penny of this compensation and more. Not because you're a victim, but because you're an extraordinary woman who faced the worst and stood tall. Ingrid reread the message several times, an inexplicable warmth spreading through her chest. It was more than validation from a boss. It was something she couldn't quite define, but it made her heart race in a way she'd forgotten was possible. Next day, after talking at length with her daughters, explaining in a simplified but honest way what had happened, Ingrid made her decision. "I'm going to accept the deal," he told Gabriel and the lawyer. "Not for the money itself, but for what it means for my daughter's future." The process of formalizing the agreement occurred with surprising speed. Within a week, the amount had already been deposited in an account specially opened for this purpose. Dr. Raphael advised Ingrid on the best ways to invest part of the money to ensure the girl's educational future, while the rest could be used to purchase a home of their own. Life, which had been a heavy burden on Ingrid's shoulders for so long, was beginning to flow differently. The injustice had been acknowledged and, in some way, redressed. However, other feelings were beginning to emerge, more complex, more delicate, and equally transformative. One Saturday morning, while the girls were playing with Timo in the small garden of the rented house, Ingrid received another message from Gabriel. "Would the twins like to spend an afternoon at the water park that opened last month? I have tickets and thought it would be a good way to celebrate everything that's happened. You're invited too, of course." Ingrid hesitated, her thumb hovering over the screen. An innocent invitation or something more? Was he crossing the line? Between boss and what exactly? Friend? Something more? "That would be great for the girls," he finally replied, keeping his tone neutral. "But don't feel obligated to include us in your weekend plans." The answer came almost instantly. "No obligation. I just like your company." When she told the girls about the invitation, their joy was immediate. Leona jumped on the couch while Lara, always more reserved, just smiled broadly, her eyes shining with excitement. For them, the idea of a day of fun with Gabriel was perfectly natural. He had become a constant presence in their conversations, almost like a hero from children's stories who had magically appeared to help the family. For Ingrid, however, the situation was infinitely more complex. Accepting the ride meant crossing an invisible boundary, allowing Gabriel to truly enter their lives in a more personal way. It meant admitting, perhaps, that there was room in her heart for something, beyond the daily struggle for survival. "It'll just be a walk," she muttered to herself as she picked out clothes for the girls. Nothing more than that. But as she stared at her reflection in the small bathroom mirror, smoothing down the curly hair she'd left loose, something she rarely did, Ingrid knew she was lying to herself. Something was changing, and she wasn't sure she was ready for what came next. The Aguas Cristalinas water park shone under the scorching sun that Sunday. Children ran excitedly between the various attractions, while parents tried to keep up with them with expressions that mixed fun and exhaustion. For the twins, it was like entering a magical world. The gigantic pools, the colorful slides, the enormous wave pool that imitated the sea. Gabriel was waiting for them at the VIP entrance, wearing shorts and a simple t-shirt that made him look very different from the formal executive Ingrid knew from the office. He smiled as they approached, noticing how different Ingrid looked with her hair down and a light dress over her swimsuit. "You came," he exclaimed, as if he had genuinely doubted she would show up. "The girls wouldn't give me peace if I cancelled," Ingrid replied with a half-smile, watching as Lara and Leona were already bouncing impatiently beside them. With VIP wristbands that guaranteed access to all attractions without waiting in line, the group began what would be an unforgettable day. Gabriel proved to be surprisingly skilled with the twins, patient in his explanations, attentive to their safety, and genuinely fun in his games. "How can you tell them apart so easily?" Ingrid asked during a moment when the girls were distracted by a water-squirting game. "Even people who have lived with us for years still get confused." Gabriel watched the twins for a moment before answering. "Lara frowns slightly when she's concentrating, as if every thought deserves her full attention. Leona has a smile that starts at the left corner of her mouth before spreading all the way across. It's a small detail, but it's obvious when you really look." The answer surprised Ingrid, not only because of the accuracy of the observation, but because of the genuine care it revealed. Gabriel didn't just look at his daughters, he really saw them. As the day wore on, Ingrid felt the barriers she had erected around herself begin to crack. There was something about the way Gabriel interacted with his daughters that touched a deep place in her heart, a place she had carefully guarded after so many disappointments. During lunch at the park restaurant, while the girls devoured burgers and fries with the insatiable hunger of those who spent the morning swimming, Gabriel turned to Ingrid with a more serious expression. "Can I ask you a personal question?" he asked quietly so the girls wouldn't hear. Ingrid nodded hesitantly, taking a sip of water to disguise her sudden nervousness. "The girl's father, does he keep in touch?" The question hit a nerve, a story she rarely shared. "No," she said after a moment. "He left us when he found out they were going to be twins. He said he didn't sign up for double responsibility." The bitterness in her voice was evident, despite her attempt to sound nonchalant. "We haven't seen him since." "I'm sorry," Gabriel said, and there was a sincerity in his voice that left no doubt. He missed the opportunity to meet two extraordinary people. "Three," Lara corrected suddenly, revealing that she had been listening to the conversation. "My mother is extraordinary too." The unexpected comment brought a smile to Gabriel's face and a blush to Ingrid's. "You're absolutely right," he agreed, looking directly at Ingrid. "Completely extraordinary." The moment was interrupted by Leona, who spilled soda on the table, creating a small mess that eased the growing tension between the adults. In the afternoon, while the twins were playing in a children's pool supervised by monitors, Gabriel and Ingrid sat in the shade of a large umbrella. The silence between them was comfortable, but heavy with unspoken words. "What about you?" Ingrid finally asked, breaking the silence. "Never married? Children?" Gabriel looked at the horizon before answering. "I was married once, to Clara, my college sweetheart. It lasted 5 years. He paused, as if choosing his words carefully. "She wanted kids, so did I, theoretically. But there was always a new project, a new acquisition, something more important in the company, or so I told myself." He turned to Ingrid, a palpable sadness in his eyes. "The truth? I think I was afraid. Afraid of not knowing how to be a father, of making the same mistakes my father made with me. Always absent, always putting work first. By the time I realized I was becoming exactly like him, it was too late. Clara got tired of waiting for me to change." "Did she get married again?" Ingrid asked. "Yes, with a college professor. They have 2 children now." He smiled wistfully. "She looks happy in the pictures I see on social media. I sincerely hope she is." Something about the vulnerability of that confession touched Ingrid deeply. For the first time, she saw beyond the successful businessman, the generous benefactor. She saw a man with his own insecurities and regrets. "It's never too late to change," she said softly, surprising herself with the almost intimate tone. Gabriel looked at her intently, as if he wanted to say something more, something important, but he was interrupted by excited screams. The twins were running towards him, soaked and smiling. "Mom, Uncle Gabriel, come see, there's a dolphin show starting." "Uncle Gabriel?" He raised his eyebrows at Ingrid, amused by the unexpected title. She shrugged, trying to sound casual, but feeling a strange warmth spread through her chest at how positively the affectionate nickname had affected him. The rest of the afternoon passed in a succession of attractions, laughter, and small moments of connection. By the time the park began to empty, signaling the end of the day, the girls were exhausted but radiant. Leona fell asleep in Gabriel's car on the way back, while Lara fought valiantly against sleep, determined not to miss a single moment of this special day. When they reached Ingrid's house, Gabriel helped carry the still sleeping Leona inside. The modest space, now decorated with personal touches that spoke of their recent financial improvement, looked welcoming in the soft evening light. "Thank you for the day," Ingrid said quietly, after settling the girls in. "It was perfect for them." "And what about you?" Gabriel asked, still standing near the door, as if hesitating between leaving and staying. "Me too," she admitted, avoiding his gaze. But... Ingrid took a deep breath, seeking the courage to express the turmoil going on in her mind. Gabriel, what are we doing? You're my boss, I'm your employee. He gestured vaguely between them. This can't work. Why not? He asked simply. Because we live in different worlds, because people will talk, because... She hesitated, finally getting to the heart of her fear. Because I don't want to be seen as someone who got her job, her money, her position through other means. Gabriel took a step towards him but kept a respectful distance. Ingrid, I know this is complicated, that there are issues of power and privilege involved, but I also know that I've never felt for anyone what I'm starting to feel for you. He ran a hand through his hair, visibly nervous. I understand your fears. I respect them. If you want me to back off to keep our relationship strictly professional, I will do that. The silence that followed seemed to hold the weight of the world. Ingrid felt torn between the growing desire she could no longer deny and the legitimate fears that paralyzed her. I don't know what I want, he finally whispered with raw honesty. It's all happening so fast. My life has been turned upside down in a matter of weeks. I need time to process, to understand what I'm feeling. Time is something I can offer, Gabriel replied softly. No pressure, no expectations. Just don't close that door completely, please. Before she could respond, Gabriel's cell phone rang insistently. He checked it with an apologetic expression. It's from the company. An emergency at the North Zone project. I need to go. Ingrid nodded, secretly relieved by the interruption that postponed a decision she didn't feel prepared for. Go. The girls and I will be fine. He smiled, already walking towards the door. See you at the office on Monday. Monday, she confirmed, returning his smile shyly. After his departure, Ingrid sat on the small balcony, contemplating the stars that were beginning to dot the night sky. Her heart was beating wildly, divided between the reason that warned her of the dangers of that approach and the emotion that blossomed against all odds. Timo approached silently, lying down next to her as he always did when he felt her disturbed. What do you think, Timo? He asked softly, stroking the dog's soft ears. Am I being foolish for believing that something like this could work? The animal just looked at her with its faithful eyes, as if to say that some questions don't have simple answers, just paths that need to be walked to find where they lead. On the other side of the city, inside his luxury apartment, Gabriel Fisher was facing his own demons. The emergency at work had been quickly resolved, but another, more personal issue was tormenting him. Her cell phone rang again. Hannah Müller's name flashed on the screen. It was her third call that week. Ever since the agreement with Ingrid, the socialite seemed determined to discuss the situation in person. This time he answered. What do you want, Hannah? He asked directly. An explanation, Gabriel, she replied, her falsely sweet voice hiding her evident irritation. Why are you so insistent on defending that maid? What does she mean to you? The question hung in the air like a veiled threat. Gabriel sensed the danger implied. Hannah Müller was known for her sharp tongue and her influence in certain social circles. A rumor started by her could easily make Ingrid's situation at the company embarrassing, confirming exactly the fears she had expressed earlier. My motives are none of your business, Hannah, he replied coldly. You did the right thing finally. The matter is closed. Really, she asked, because I've been hearing some interesting rumors about you taking a certain employee and her daughters on weekend outings. Does your management know that you're having an affair with a subordinate? I think they'd be intrigued. The threat was now explicit. Gabriel felt an icy fury take hold of him. Be careful what you insinuate, Hannah, he warned, his voice dangerously controlled. Don't forget that I have enough information about you and Richard that would certainly interest the IRS and possibly the federal police. Do you really want to continue this conversation? The silence on the other end of the line was brief but telling. You've changed, Gabriel, Hannah said finally, and I'm not sure it's for the better. The call ended, leaving Gabriel with a bitter taste. He didn't like resorting to threats, even against someone like Hannah. This wasn't the man he wanted to be, especially not now, when he was beginning to glimpse the possibility of a different, more meaningful life. Looking out his apartment, window at the illuminated city below, Gabriel wondered if Ingrid was right. Maybe their worlds really were too different to connect without consequences. Maybe some barriers, however invisible they seemed, were fundamentally insurmountable. But then he remembered Leona's smile, Lara's wit, and Ingrid's quiet strength. And he knew with a certainty that transcended logic that some connections were worth any risk. What he didn't know yet was that, at that very moment, Hannah Miller was typing a message to Richard. "I think we've found Gabriel Fisher's weakness, and we're going to use it." The days that followed the trip to the water park were marked by a silent tension that hovered between Gabriel and Ingrid in the corridors of Fisher Construções. Both maintained an impeccable professional distance, perhaps even exaggerated, while internally they struggled with feelings that were increasingly difficult to ignore. Ingrid threw herself into her work with renewed intensity, as if sheer dedication could drive away the confusing thoughts of the man who had transformed her life. Gabriel, meanwhile, found himself distracted by important meetings, his mind constantly returning to the image of Ingrid with her hair loose in the sun, laughing with her daughters. It was Marcia, Ingrid's supervisor, who first noticed the strange dynamic. "Did something happen between you and the boss?" she asked abruptly, as they worked together on an end-of-day report. "What do you mean?" Ingrid replied defensively, feeling her face heat up. "You barely look at each other, but when one of you leaves the room, the other can't take his eyes off the door." Marcia smiled gently. "I've worked here for 10 years, Ingrid. I've never seen Gabriel Fisher like this." "I don't know what you're talking about," Ingrid insisted, focusing stubbornly on the computer screen. "It's okay, you don't have to tell me," Marcia conceded. "I just want you to know that not everyone here is prejudiced or gossipy. Some of us just want to see good people find happiness." Those simple words stayed with Ingrid for the rest of the day, making her question whether she was allowing old fears to block new possibilities. On Friday of that week, a package arrived on her desk, a small, elegantly wrapped box with no card or identification. Intrigued, opened it carefully, finding inside a delicate silver frame. In it was a photograph she had never known existed. Her and the twins at the water park, all three of them smiling broadly at the camera, their expressions of pure joy perfectly capturing the essence of that day. Ingrid felt her eyes well up. She knew exactly who the gift was from and what it meant. Not pressure, not a demand, just a gentle reminder of a moment of shared happiness. That same day, when picking up the girls from school, Lara handed them a colorful invitation. "It's Amelia's birthday party," he explained excitedly. "It's going to be somewhere with a pool and everything." "How wonderful!" exclaimed Ingrid, genuinely happy to see her daughters finally socially integrated in their new school, something that had previously seemed impossible. "There's just one problem," Lara continued more hesitantly. "It's the same weekend we were going to visit Grandma in the countryside." Ingrid bit her lip, thoughtful. The visit to her mother had been planned for weeks, but she knew how. Important this invitation was to the girls. That was when an idea came to her, too bold for her taste, but perhaps necessary. That night, after long reflections and a sincere conversation with her daughters, Ingrid finally sent a message to Gabriel. "Thank you for the frame. The photo is precious. I need to visit my mother in the country this weekend, but the girls received an important invitation to a party on Saturday. Would it be too much to ask if you could accompany them? I completely understand if that's not possible." The answer came almost instantly. "It would be an honor and a pleasure. Don't worry about anything. They'll be safe with me." That Saturday, Gabriel found himself surrounded by noisy children at a birthday party on a farm on the outskirts of the city. To the surprise of many parents present and himself, he found himself completely at home in that environment, helping to organize games, making sure the twins were fed properly, and applying sunscreen to their little faces every 2 hours, according to the meticulous instructions that Ingrid had left. "Are you their father?" asked one of the mothers present, watching him help Leona pour herself some juice. "No," he replied simply. "Just a family friend." The word friend seemed simultaneously insufficient and excessive to describe what he was becoming. But at that moment, It was the best he could offer. Inside, Ingrid finally revealed to her mother, Donna Conceição, everything that had happened in the last few months, from the unjust accusation to the unexpected meeting with Gabriel, the financial compensation and the new job. "And this man, what does he want in exchange for so much kindness?" asked Donna Conceição, with the natural distrust of someone who had lived long enough to know that rarely does anything come without a cost. "That's the thing, Mom," Ingrid sighed. "I don't think he wants anything. Or rather, I think he wants something that I can't be sure I'm ready to give." "So your heart," the lady concluded with the wisdom of years. Ingrid nodded, surprised by the simplicity with which her mother had identified the heart of her dilemma. "I'm so scared, Mom, of getting hurt again, of trusting the wrong person, of mixing gratitude with other feelings." Donna Conceição took her daughter's hands in hers, the gnarled fingers marked by decades of hard work. "Daughter, gratitude is a beautiful feeling. But don't confuse it with love. Love has another flavor, another color." He smiled gently. "When you look at this man, what do you feel? Gratitude or something else?" The question hung in the air, demanding an honesty that Ingrid had been avoiding for weeks. "Something more," he finally admitted quietly. "Much more." On Sunday night, when Ingrid returned from the countryside, she found her house impeccably clean, the twins already bathed, and Gabriel in the kitchen, finishing a simple but delicious-smelling dinner. "You didn't have to do that," she said, surprised at the domestic scene that greeted her. "It was the girls' idea," Gabriel replied, smiling. "They wanted you to have a special welcome. How was the visit to your mother?" "Enlightening," he replied enigmatically. "And the party?" "Amazing," Leona chimed in, still energetic despite the busy weekend. "Uncle Gabriel taught everyone how to make a wheelbarrow. Even the other parents learned." "Wheelchair cart?" Ingrid repeated, arching an eyebrow at Gabriel. "I still have some hidden talents from my teenage gymnastics days," he explained, slightly embarrassed. Dinner passed amidst laughter and the twins' lively stories about the party. When the girls finally went to bed, Gabriel and Ingrid found themselves alone in the small living room. "Thank you for this," she said softly. "It meant a lot to them, and to me. It was a pleasure, really." He paused, as if gathering his courage. "Ingrid, I need to tell you something. I got a call from Hannah Müller a few days ago." The name made Ingrid stiffen instantly. She made veiled threats about us, about spreading rumors in the company. Gabriel took a deep breath before continuing. "I want you to know this because you have the right to be fully informed. If you decide that you'd rather keep our relationship strictly professional, I completely understand." Ingrid absorbed the information in silence. It was exactly the kind of complication she had feared. All the more reason to keep her distance, to protect her new fragile stability. "What did you say to her?" he finally asked. "He said she should mind her own business," Gabriel replied with a half-smile. "Perhaps not in the most diplomatic words." "You confronted Hannah Müller because of me?" Ingrid asked incredulously. She was well aware of the woman's power and influence in the city's social and business circles. "I would face much more," he replied simply. "Ingrid, I know this all. Happened very quickly. I know there are complications, social barriers, work issues, but I also know that I have never felt for anyone what I feel for you." He took a step towards her, still maintaining a respectful distance. "It's not gratitude," he continued. "It's not charity or some savior complex. It's admiration for your strength, for your character, for the incredible mother you are. It's the way you transformed my empty life into something meaningful. It's love?" Ingrid added, her voice barely above a whisper. "Yes," he admitted. "I believe so." The silence that followed seemed to contain the weight of all the important decisions in Ingrid's life. Her heart was beating wildly, torn between fear and pure hope. Slowly, as if making an irrevocable decision, she took a step forward, closing the distance between them. "My mother told me something important yesterday," he said softly. "She said that life is too short to waste opportunities for happiness out of fear, that sometimes we have to take risks to find out if something is real." Another step. Forward. They were now close enough to feel each other's breath. "I don't know if this is going to work," he continued. "There are so many complications, so many differences, but I know I want to try. Because when I look at you, I don't just see the man who helped me or my boss. I see someone who makes me believe for the first time in years that maybe I deserve more than just surviving." The words had barely left her lips when Gabriel closed the final distance between them, enveloping her in an embrace that seemed to contain all the tenderness and protection she had ever known. When their lips finally met, it was as if all doubts momentarily dissolved, replaced by a certainty that transcended logic. "Mommy?" Lara's voice abruptly separated them. The girl was standing in the hallway doorway, watching them with a curious expression. "I came to drink water," he explained, but his shrewd eyes revealed that he had perfectly understood what had happened. "Of course, my love," Ingrid replied, her face flushed with embarrassment. "I'll get it for you." As Ingrid went to the kitchen, Gabriel and Lara were alone for a moment, looking at each other in evaluating silence. "Do you really like my mother?" the girl asked directly, with the frankness characteristic of children. "Yes," Gabriel replied with equal frankness, "very much." "Are you going to make her cry like our father did?" The question, so simple and yet so profound, struck Gabriel like a physical blow. Crouching down to Lara's level, he answered with all the sincerity he could muster. "I can't promise there will never be tears, Lara. Sometimes people get hurt even when they love each other very much. But I can promise that I will never abandon you, that I will always try to do what's best for your mother and for both of you, and that every decision I make will have your happiness first." Lara studied him for a long moment, with surprising intensity for someone so young, before nodding slowly. "Okay," he said finally, "but if you break your promise, Timo will bite your shoe." Gabriel laughed, relieved that the tension had broken. "It's a fair deal." Ingrid returned with the glass of water, watching the interaction with a mixture of tenderness and apprehension. After Lara drank and returned to her room, the two adults found themselves alone again, the previous moment irrevocably altered but not diminished. "I think we just got approval," Gabriel commented quietly. "From one of the twins," Ingrid corrected, smiling. "Leona might have a completely different opinion." "We'll deal with it when the time comes," he replied, taking her hands in his. One step at a time. Over the next few weeks, that night proved to be the beginning of a gradual but profound transformation. Gabriel began to become part of the family routine in small but meaningful ways. Occasional weekday dinners, Sunday walks, help with schoolwork. To minimize office gossip, Ingrid was transferred to the company's social responsibility department, where her natural talent for dealing with people found a more appropriate outlet. Hannah Müller's threat never fully materialized. Perhaps out of fear of Gabriel's counter-threats, perhaps because other, juicier scandals soon captured her attention. The few rumors that did surface were quickly silenced by Ingrid's impeccable professional demeanor and the genuine respect Gabriel had earned over the years among his employees. 3 months after their first kiss, on a particularly sunny Sunday afternoon, Gabriel was helping the twins plant flowers in the small garden of their new home, a modest but comfortable property that Ingrid had purchased with part of her compensation money. Timo ran excitedly among them, occasionally knocking over an empty flower pot or stealing a gardening tool for an impromptu chase. Watching the scene from the balcony, Ingrid felt a wave of gratitude so intense it nearly took her breath away. Her life, once a constant struggle for survival, was now filled with possibilities and simple joys she had never imagined possible. "What are you thinking about?" Gabriel asked, approaching with dirt-stained hands and a smile that made her heart race even after all these months. "How life turns around," she replied, intertwining her fingers with his, indifferent to the earth. "A year ago I was desperate, selling our dog to buy medicine. And now—" "What now?" he prompted when she hesitated. "Now, for the first time, I'm not afraid of the future," she added, her eyes meeting his with quiet certainty. "Because I know that no matter what happens, we won't be alone." "Never again," Gabriel promised, leaning in for a soft kiss that was interrupted by excited squeals and childish laughter as the twins and Timo decided to join them, turning the romantic moment into a group hug full of earth, love, and promises of a shared future. In that perfect moment, with the sun casting golden shadows over the small garden, Ingrid understood that some stories don't